Finally, let's do some coding. So the first step to this entire project, the first line of code we're going to write is going to be the .NET Core part of the project. So I've decided, not necessarily enthusiastically, but I think we're going to go with Xamarin for the mobile apps, normal Xamarin, not Forms. WPF for the Windows app, just for now, because it's mostly for fast development. It's not really for the ability to have a WPF app in this case. It's going to be 99% used on a mobile and a watch. But it gives us the ability to rapidly develop and debug and test, as well as me teach you some nice WPF UI. So that's where we're going with them two. But there was just too much draw to .NET Core to ignore for the bulk of the code. We had multiple choices, most revolved around JavaScript or .NET really. And there's just too much going on with .NET Core to ignore. It's definitely going to be the future of technology and software development, I feel. So we made the decision in the Discord chat to go with .NET Core as the base, and that led to the discussion of really every single thing will go in .NET Core now except UI, and that's it. There's every single thing up to the view models, and the only thing left is to make UI to hook into it. So we needed UI across the platforms that could hook into .NET Core, and the only real option that was viable is Xamarin. Now, it's not the best option because it's typically buggy and slow, but I feel it's the best option we have. So we've got to give it a go. We've got to give it a roll, and that's what we're going to do. But the first thing we're going to jump into now is we're going to make the foundation, the first project, which will be the blueberry.core .NET 3 core library for the whole project. So let's get going. So the first part of this is we're going to use .NET Core 3.0. And it's very near release, like literally a day ago, it's in preview 8. This is just about to come out. So I'm not going to bother doing what they recommend here, installing the preview version of Visual Studio. We're just going to enable the preview features because it's got to be that close that it will work. And by the time we do any serious coding, this is going to actually be out. So I'm sure by the time a few of you watch this video, .NET Core 3 will be, not in preview. But for now it is. So we're just going to click on the 64-bit .NET Core installer here. And then we're going to install that. So let's open Visual Studio and start by creating a new project. And then type in class library. And you'll see we have a few options. We've got .NET Standard, Universal Windows, .NET Framework, and Core. And more further down, well, that's VB. So you've got these four. Firstly, Universal Windows is obviously for Windows, so we don't want that. .NET Framework is the old style of class library. And then you're left with .NET Standard and .NET Core. The main difference being .NET Standard will work with Mono, which is Xamarin, but has fewer APIs because it has to be obviously supported across further frameworks than just .NET Core. Whereas ideally we want to be on a .NET Core class library to have all the API. So we're going to be slightly limited in order to support the Android and the iOS builds, but maybe in future we can then migrate them to a .NET Core. So we'll have to pick .NET Standard. So we'll pick that, and then for the library, we're going to call this blueberry.core. And I'm going to place it in my Git repository in the Blueberry. We're going to make a subfolder in here called source. And we'll move this around after. So again, don't overthink this. I'll just put this in for now, then we'll move it. So we will have the solution name just wants to be Blueberry because it's for the whole project. This is going to be we'll have multiple solutions, but this one's going to encompass everything we work on for now. So let's just create that. And then go to Tools, Options, and just make sure we have in General Preview Features, use Preview Features. If you haven't, this isn't already out now as standard .NET Core 3. And then on this project now, right-click and Properties, and change .NET Standard. I believe it can support 2.1. Xamarin. So what we'll do for that is if it doesn't, we'll drop it back down. That builds. Let me just make my screen larger as well. So here we have the very starting point now with a single class and a dependency. So there's a few ground rules I'm going to try to stick to in this new project. One being I don't want anything in this entire project to be static. So anyone contributing to this code, we're going to make a conscious effort to not make anything static. The reason being is a lot of this now, as you grow a large application, really wants to be dependency injection driven, and things like unit testing. they're not really usable as such, or they're not ideal when things are static, because then they're stuck in the app domain. You don't initialize them. There's no configurability to swap them in and out easy. So really, I don't feel a need for static. What I find is that I tend to make things static out of partly just laziness. Oh, I want a helper to say send an email. We'll make a static email helper that I can just do .send. But really, we should make that into a module that gets newed up using dependency injection or unit testing. So one is I'm going to make a conscious decision not to do static classes. The second is we have the editor config file that will now define the standards of the code, which everybody will follow. So it's like the tab spacing, the use of var, the style of getters and setters, all the kind of rules of how the code should be laid out, as well as the commenting, which some people love, some people hate. I'm a lot different than most developers. So you'll see my previous videos defending commenting and the importance of it and the simple lack of it in the industry. So a lot of people have the belief that just because most people don't do it, and there's even people that are smart at what they do that actually explicitly state to not comment. That doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean it's wrong, it doesn't mean my opinion's right. But I give my valid reasons for commenting, and I believe heavily that commenting is underused and completely used for the wrong purpose. People totally misunderstand the point of commenting. They believe if the code's self-evident, then you shouldn't comment. So I'm not going to get into the big rant about commenting, but this code will be commented. And it's basically every line is commented. It's kind of read it like a book. And if you want to see why, you can just look at my previous videos on, why you comment your code. So that's rule number 2. I think, to be honest, that's the current 2 rules I have. So we'll make a little document with some kind of guidelines, starting with those 2 rules, and we'll take it from there. So in this class now, it's a case of, well, what do we do? Well, what we want to do is really, we're not too concerned about the code yet. We want to get this built and compiling. We want to get the Android built and compiling, and we want to get the Windows built and compiling. Then we'll start with the kind of structure, the framework, the injection of code, which will be dependency injection. So we will start with dependency injection. And we're going to use DNA Framework to help bring in the .NET Core dependency injection straight into a class library that we can then consume. And we really want a setup point. So I feel by the time we get to that, we will have a setup module. So let's just start with something simple. And this can change again. Don't worry too much about this being exactly what it is. So we'll do, say, I setup application. And I'm not really thinking much of it here at the minute. We know it's going to be an interface, and it will be I setup application. And the plan of this is that any top level UI, so Android, iOS, Windows, all those will first have to initialize. This will be the starting point of the application, and they can use this to inject their application specific dependencies, or anything that's specific to that UI, if there's anything specific to that UI. So we'll start with a comment here to say the entry point into the Blueberry application. And also notice here, there is no spell checker. So we want to go tools or rather extensions, manage extensions, go to online, type in spell check, download the spell checker. I also noticed the top result there was the GitHub extension people have mentioned, so let's just chuck that on as well. And close that. And then we'll restart in a minute, so that picks up on that error typo. The entry point into the Blueberry application used to set up the environment. All top-level applications should create an instance of this. And then we also need at some point somewhere in the code to comment the namespace. So that's fully commented. So we'll pick the starting point here to comment the namespace. The core functionality shared between all parts of the Blueberry application. Now this will probably change again as we grow, because as well as the client, we're also going to have the server, and the server won't necessarily have this set up. So already we might want to just rename this to client application setup. And again, don't overthink it, don't worry, things can change as we go. when you're at this early point, just get coding and get moving. Now, I do know we want DNA framework, but let's first chuck in, before I forget that, to do that, the editor config file. So if I just go to Angel 6 Web 1 on mine, this has got the styles in for the editor config. We'll chuck that into the Blueberry in here to make sure we have the standards in there. And this is a file I've created over time that has my kind of coding standards that I like. And this is just a defined, I think I even put the note in there where it comes from, so you can go and read that. And then there's a good resource here. And then these are all my kind of rules that I like to have. So, you know, the prefixes on asyncs and not to use this dot and all kind of things like that. So that's in there. I mentioned we want to use the DNA framework. Now, really, I want to use the source code of the DNA framework because we're going to be using it quite heavily in here and probably customizing it to match this. So I'm tempted to do the source code link, but then everybody's going to have to clone that. So for now, I'll just add the NuGet package and see how that goes, but we may change this to doing source code. So if you just type in DNA into the browse of NuGet packages, and we have DNA.framework here, and just make sure you've got DNA.framework by Luke Malpass, and install this. This will bring in, as I mentioned, the dependency injection things out of .NET Core, which is in there by default, but it's not as easy as just going, you know, here it is and use it. So we've started adding that. I know straight away we'll need JSON. So newtonsoft.json, we'll install that. And beyond that, I don't think we'll have many dependencies initially. So this seems really basic and simple, but that's all we really need at the minute to make sure this compiles. Now, if we open up the project folder and we go to the source now, so here's the top level Git. In here, we have source code, then we have Blueberry, really, which is where we don't want it in this folder. So let's just close this down now. And let's structure this. So we have in source, really that wants to be source straight away. Oh, and this is now going to install the add-ons I've just installed, the GitHub and the spell checker. So let that install on the side. So now, if we first move the core and the solution up a folder and delete the subfolder, this is more like what we want to see. So you've got source code, you've got the solution, and right now you've got the core in there with just those files. So that's great, that's all we need. And let's just now get this committed in Git. So we open up GitHub Desktop. And you can see in here now we have changes. So you typically want to split these up. And I've already seen an issue with this GitHub Desktop compared to GitKraken, unless there's a tree view in here. That's kind of a shame. So I like to look at these as like a tree view with folders, but I guess it doesn't have it. It'll do for now. So let's just commit the editor config on its own firstly, because you like to split these up simply. So add our editor config coding style. And commit that. There's a new version already. So let's restart. Maybe that adds tree view if it was listening. So no tree view. Unless there's options in view, maybe. Changes, repo list, branches, toggle. Options, appearance, no. Oh well. So that's that one committed. So we have added our editor config. And then in here, really, this is the initial solution, which has just got core in with very basic descriptions, simple file. And we're targeting .NET Standard 2.1 so that Mono and Xamarin work with this. So for this, the base starting point for the Blueberry core, commit that. Okay, so we're going to push. And authentication failed. Okay, that might be due to the update. I've signed back in. Let's try again. No. Okay, let's try command line. It's a good start for the UI. Try git push. If this works, then this UI's messed up. Yeah, so now that's pushed fine. Maybe it was a one-off. So let's now fetch. Yeah, so this is now thankfully all broken. So let's just, maybe because I added it locally, let's try removing it. Sure you want to remove Blueberry. Sure, remove it and remove it to the bin because I've pushed it. That's fine. And let's clone again. So let's try recloning Blueberry through the UI. And let's try fetching. So now it's fetching. So yeah, this GitHub desktop is a little bit touchy about really working. So I think it is a bit early for this application. We'll see how it handles. I just like the UI and I like new things, so we'll give it a chance. But you'll see now we've done the editor config and the base starting point we've pushed live. And we've got those changes in there. So if you want to follow along now, you'd go File, Clone Repository, if you haven't already, and clone the Blueberry repository. And then you could just fetch by clicking this, and that would pull the latest code changes. And then in your code, you'd see all this code. So that's where you'd get to. So I know that seems really short, and it's basically just a blank project. But the structure here is to let's get everything collectively building first. Let's get the base class library that's linked between all the projects. Let's get the Android base project built. Let's get the WPF built. But I'm pretty sure the watch languages are not going to link into .NET Core. But at the same time, I think they're only going to be small and they'll just be talking to the phone to pull in data and show stuff. So I'm not too worried about the watch side. We might even get like a blank iOS one built as well so that we can see that it links between them all. But if it links with Xamarin Android, it's going to link with Xamarin iOS. So there we have the first little bit of code that's ready to go. It's all commit and pushed, and that's our starting point. Next up, we're going to make a blank Xamarin Android app, get it deployed to the phone, get that committed. And then following that, we'll do WPF, and then we can start piecing things together and making some more code. Hopefully, you've learned something from this video. Most importantly, to just get going. Don't really overthink a project that's large. Just start coding and, pick a point, start there, work your way through, and just every week kind of rethink where you're at, where your next steps are. But don't try and think all at the start too much about the massive project. Just get coding. If you have any questions, leave a comment. And as always, if I've helped you with anything through this course, please do think about donating.